Studio A, Burbank, California, 2:47 a.m., June 1992. The studio had been in session for 19 hours. Empty coffee cups littered the mixing console. Whitney Houston's throat was raw. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was crumbling. She hadn't slept in 2 days. And now Clive Davis, the man who'd discovered her at 19, who'd promised her parents he'd make her the biggest star in the world, just said the words that would trigger the most legendary vocal confrontation in music history. If you sing "I Will Always Love You" like that, I'm pulling it from the album. You sound like a gospel singer having a breakdown. This is supposed to be a love song, not a church revival. Whitney's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. She just poured her soul into that take. Every bit of pain from her mother's disappointment that she'd chosen pop over gospel. Every sleepless night wondering if Bobby loved her or her fame. Every music critic who'd called her technically perfect but emotionally cold. She just proved them all wrong with those 16 seconds, and Clive wanted to delete it. Behind the mixing console, producer David Foster had his finger hovering over the delete button, ready to erase the take that would eventually sell 20 million copies and become the best-selling single by a female artist in history. But right now, everyone in that studio thought Whitney Houston had lost her mind. If this story of artistic warfare and vocal triumph moves you, hit that subscribe button. You're about to witness how 16 seconds of defiance created a legend and destroyed a voice. 3 weeks earlier, Whitney had been handed a Dolly Parton country ballad that nobody wanted. The Bodyguard movie studio executives were clear. We need a safe pop ballad, something radio-friendly, something that won't scare middle America. Whitney took the demo home to her mansion in Mendham, New Jersey, the same town where she'd grown up watching her mother, Cissy Houston, dominate gospel stages. Listened once, called her mother. "Mama," Whitney said, her voice catching. "They want me to sing this pretty, but I hear it differently." Cissy knew that tone. She'd heard it when Whitney was 16 and announced she was signing with Arista Records instead of staying in gospel. "Baby, what do you hear?" "I hear church. I hear pain. I hear every woman who ever loved someone she had to let go." Whitney paused. "I hear the truth everyone's been trying to polish out of me for 10 years. Cissy was quiet for a long moment. Her daughter had been mega famous since 1985. 7 years of carefully crafted pop perfection. 7 years of Clive Davis shaping her into America's sweetheart. 7 years of suppressing the gospel power that had made Whitney special in the first place. "Then sing that," Cissy finally said. "But baby, they're gonna fight you. They always do when a black woman chooses her truth over their comfort." They fought her. The first studio session was a disaster. Whitney came in with her vision. Start the song gentle, vulnerable, almost whispered. Then build. Build until that bridge where she'd unleash everything. Every gospel run her mother taught her. Every ounce of pain from her own failing marriage. Every bit of power she'd been holding back for 10 years of pop princess performances. Clive Davis listened to the first take, shook his head. "Whitney, this is the Bodyguard soundtrack, not a gospel album. Kevin Costner's character is supposed to be in love with you. You're singing like you're at a funeral." "Maybe love is a funeral," Whitney shot back. "Maybe that's why this song works." The room went silent. Nobody talked to Clive Davis like that. The man had launched careers, ended careers, shaped the entire direction of popular music for 3 decades. He'd personally molded Whitney from a talented church girl into a global phenomenon, and she just challenged him. David Foster, watching from the mixing board, later recalled, "I'd seen artists disagree with Clive before. Never like this. Whitney wasn't being difficult. She was fighting for her artistic soul. And honestly, I'd never seen her so alive. 10 years of playing it safe had dulled something in her. This fight, it was bringing her back." But Whitney wasn't done. She turned to David Foster, the legendary producer who'd worked with Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion, every major vocalist in the industry. "David, you've recorded 1,000 love songs. How many of them told the truth? How many admitted that loving someone sometimes means destroying yourself?" Her voice cracked on that last word. The room suddenly realized this wasn't just about music. This was about her marriage, about the tabloid stories, about Bobby Brown's latest arrest 2 weeks ago, about Whitney Houston, the perfect pop princess whose perfect life was shattering. David Foster looked at Clive, back at Whitney, saw tears forming in her eyes that she was desperately trying to hide. Let's try it your way. One take. That's when Whitney Houston recorded the version that would make history and trigger the 2:47 a.m. confrontation that almost killed it. Whitney stepped back into the vocal booth. Through the glass, she could see Clive Davis checking his watch, clearly ready to go home, clearly unconvinced this would work. She closed her eyes, took 3 deep breaths, the technique her mother taught her before every gospel performance. The track started. The arrangement began exactly as Whitney envisioned, tender, vulnerable, almost fragile. Her voice was a whisper, a confession. If I should stay, I would only be in your way. This wasn't performance. This was confession. Then came the second verse. Her voice got stronger, more gospel-inflected. The runs started creeping in. The pure pop was giving way to church, and you could see Clive Davis tensing. And then came the bridge. And I will always love you. 16 seconds. One sustained note that climbed, dove, soared, and shattered every expectation of what a human voice could do. It wasn't singing. It was spiritual warfare. Every music executive who told her to stay safe and sound whiter just got obliterated by those 16 seconds. Whitney's eyes were closed, tears streaming down her face, her hand gripping the microphone stand so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't in a Burbank recording studio anymore. She was in New Hope Baptist Church, singing to God, to her mother, to every person who'd ever told her she was too much. When she finished, the silence in Studio A was deafening. David Foster's hand was still on the delete button. Clive Davis was shaking his head slowly. Whitney opened her eyes, saw their faces, and walked out of the vocal booth. I'll pack my things. Whitney, Clive started. No. Her voice was raw from the session, barely above a whisper. I've spent 10 years singing the way you wanted, making myself smaller, prettier, more palatable. That take, that's who I actually am. If you don't want her, I understand, but I'm done pretending. She headed for the door. Whitney, stop. It was David Foster. He rewound the tape, hit play. That 16-second run filled the studio again. This time, everyone heard it differently. Not as chaos, as genius. Clive Davis stood up slowly, walked over to Whitney. I've been in this business for 30 years. I've discovered Janis Joplin, Bruce Springsteen, Alicia Keys, and I just made the biggest mistake of my career trying to change you. He looked at David Foster. Don't touch a single note. It's perfect. But perfect came with a price. The morning after that session, Whitney sent her mother a cassette copy of the final mix. Sissy Houston was in her kitchen in East Orange, New Jersey, making breakfast when she hit play on her boombox. By the second verse, Sissy sat down. By the bridge, that 16-second run, she had both hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She called Whitney immediately. Baby, what did you do? Mama, that's not pop music. That's not even gospel. That's anointing. That's the sound of a woman laying her soul bare before God and everyone. Whitney Elizabeth Houston, do you understand what you just did? Mama, they hated it. Clive almost killed it. I don't care what Clive thought. I don't care what anybody thought. You just sang with your whole heart. For the first time since you left the church, I heard my daughter, not the pop star. My daughter. But Sissy's maternal pride turned to maternal concerns 6 months later when Whitney could barely speak. Vocal nodules. The damage wasn't just from that one session. It was cumulative. Years of touring, performances, maintaining that perfect Whitney Houston sound. But that I Will Always Love You session, that was the breaking point. Whitney showed the doctor the session notes. He studied the transcription of that 16-second run, the sustained high notes, the chest voice to head voice transitions, the sheer power required. Ms. Houston, from a physiological standpoint, what you did shouldn't be possible. You essentially injured yourself for 3 minutes and 16 seconds. He paused. It's like asking an Olympic sprinter to run a marathon at full sprint speed. Spectacular, historic, but your body pays the price. Whitney was quiet for a long moment. Was it worth it? The doctor didn't know how to answer that, but the numbers did. I Will Always Love You stayed at #1 for 14 weeks, sold over 20 million copies worldwide, became the best-selling single by a female artist in history, won Whitney her third Grammy, made The Bodyguard soundtrack the best-selling soundtrack of all time. But Whitney Houston's voice never fully recovered. That 16-second battle with Clive Davis, that moment of artistic defiance, it changed music forever. It also changed her vocal cords forever. In 2015, the Whitney Houston Center for Voice and Medicine was established at the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary. Their mission? To help singers understand the physical cost of vocal perfection, to teach them how to achieve power without injury. The center's founder, Dr. Steven Zeitels, who'd also treated Adele, Steven Tyler, and countless other vocal powerhouses, said it plainly. Whitney Houston was a vocal athlete, and like any athlete who pushes to superhuman levels, there are consequences. That I Will Always Love You performance? Vocally, it's the equivalent of running a marathon at sprint speed. Spectacular, historic, unsustainable. The center now treats over 500 professional singers annually. They use that specific recording as a teaching tool, both for its brilliance and as a cautionary tale. Whitney gave us a masterpiece, Dr. Zeitels explains, but she also gave us a roadmap of what happens when artistic passion exceeds physiological limits. Clive Davis attended the center's opening. In his speech, he said, "That night in Studio A, I tried to make Whitney sing safer, smaller, less. She refused. She gave us everything, literally everything she had. I'm here today because I never want another artist to face that impossible choice. Artistic truth or vocal health. Whitney proved you shouldn't have to sacrifice either." But here's what Clive didn't say publicly, what he confessed to David Foster years later over dinner in Los Angeles. When Whitney walked toward that door, ready to quit rather than compromise her vision, I saw something I'd been trying to suppress for 10 years. I saw Sissy Houston's daughter, the church girl, the real Whitney, and I realized I'd spent a decade trying to polish away the very thing that made her extraordinary. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. I shaped her into what I thought the world wanted. But that night, she showed me what the world needed. And it almost didn't happen because I was too afraid to let her be herself. David Foster nodded. That's why that recording is special, Clive. It's not just a great vocal performance. It's the sound of an artist winning the battle for her own soul. Today, that Studio A recording session has become legendary among music producers. It's taught in vocal programs as the Houston Principle, the moment when an artist's truth collided with industry expectations and won. But it's also taught as a cautionary tale, because Whitney Houston gave us that 16-second miracle, and it cost her everything. Have you ever had to choose between playing it safe and showing your true self, even if it meant risking everything? Drop your story in the comments below. And if Whitney's battle for artistic truth moved you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the moments we refuse to be anything less than who we really are.